Good morning, everybody. Today we heard what history tells us is the parable of the prodigal son. But every time I read this as a counselor, I begin to think twice and see the story differently. It's not so much the story of the prodigal son that was the focus of attention for the many hundreds of years that we have been talking about this parable. It could also be the story of the prodigal father, a father who was so prodigal as to give what in the interpretation of the older son is a bit too much love for the younger one. But it is also a story of a resentful brother. And therefore, in whatever way we look at the parable, there is something here that I know touches you to the core. Let me start with bad news. The bad news is that the closeness between siblings that is presupposed by all of us maybe is really a myth. And let me explain. Yung kapatid ni Madonna, si Christopher Ciccone, and Madonna, I forgot her real name, but the family name is Ciccone, Italian descent. They are at loggerheads ever since, and even up until now, magkaaway sila. Magkapatid na hindi nag-uusap, nagbabangay. Kung minsan, yung sinasabi nating mga magkakapatid na napakalapit sa isa't isa't nagmamahalan is really a fairy tale in many cases. It may be a myth. And does that mean to say that we are surrendering to the reality of our human existence and the reality of the fact that we can be hateful to each other even if we are close in terms of blood and kinship ties? I'm not saying that. But I would like to focus on one sentence that maybe you have missed. After talking about the father giving the share, bata pa nangungubra na ng kanyang mana, malakas pa yung tatay niya sinabi na nung bunsong kapatid, akin na yung aking mana. Napakasamang pakinggan niya na masakit sa tenga sa Filipino culture. Malakas pa ang magulang kinukuha na ang kanyang parte. Pero narinig ba nating umangal ang ama? Hindi. Ibinigay sa kanya ang hinihingi, bigay hilig, prodigal father, prodigal in his love, generous to a fault, who gave half of the property he should not be giving away just yet. But since the younger one medyo mapusok, nagmamadali, nasanay sa instant food, fast food, instant culture, nasanay sa digital dictatorship, so akin na yung aking mana, and I want it now, not tomorrow, now. But then, there is one sentence here that I'd like you to focus on. By the way, kahit yung anak ni Prince Charles, si Prince William, at para akong marites, no? Well, these are from psychologists who talk about this phenomenon that is very common, more common than you think. Sabi mismo ni Prince Harry, the two of us are treading on different paths right now. It's a very English way of putting it, very British. You say a lot without saying too much. The two of us are treading on different paths. We are pursuing different paths. Which means hindi kami nagkakasundo. Yun lang ibig sabihin nun. And you know very well that Prince Harry is living now in the US, and he doesn't want to have any part of the pomp and circumstance involved with British royalty. Ayaw niya yung mga rituals na yan. But Prince William apparently is more of the traditional kind, who is at home with pomp and circumstance, and with all the rites and the rituals associated with a monarchy that is already passé. Iilang bansa na lamang sa mundo ang may hari at reyna. And they are all constitutional monarchies. But kahit na wala na ang Tsar ng Russia, and the last Tsar who was killed in 1918 by the Bolsheviks, who started the revolution in 1917. O kita nyo, meron pa rin mga diktador. I'm not gonna mention names, you know well, but just as well as I do, how despots still continue to act like potentates and kings and queens who dictate on millions and millions of people. And I don't know what you make of it, but there are Russian soldiers defecting to Turkey, defecting to other neighboring countries. Pagdating doon, they didn't know they were going to fight a war. They were just told to do some military operation. And they realized they were killing their relatives who spoke the same language, at least in some places in the Ukraine. And this is the sentence I'd like you to remember today, and this is the good news. Whether or not you are at loggerheads with your brother, accept it as reality. Hindi lahat ng magkakapatid ay magkasundo. And I know this from experience. There are brothers and siblings and sisters who by nature are close to each other, but the reality is that there are many factors that can make you drift apart. For example, the sibling rank, the amount of years that separate the two of you. Pag ang panganay ay nanatiling panganay at bunso ng higit na 8 taon, siya ang bunso for 8 years, and then may dumating na asungot, pinanganak after 8 years. Then it can happen, I'm not saying it will happen, it can happen that the older one can resent the coming of the Johnny-come-lately who was born 8 years after him or her, after he had hugged all the attention of everybody, including grandparents, because he was the first and the only grandchild. And then all of a sudden, after 8 years, there came another one who now hugs the headlines and who is now the object of care and attention of just about everybody. Then resentment grows. And this is the resentment that we see in the older son. But the younger son, and this is a sentence that I'd like you to focus on, coming to his senses, he thought, how many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food to eat? Coming to his senses. The whole of our Lenten prayer, fasting, and almsgiving is designed for us to come back to our senses. Ang matauhan, kumisan dinadagukan tayo ng Panginoon. Somebody said, God whispers to us in our joys, but shouts at us in our pain. When all of a sudden we realize that we are not as healthy as we were just 2 weeks ago. And you know very well that when you monitor your blood sugar, you can have normal blood sugar today, normal blood sugar tomorrow, and then all of a sudden sometime next month your blood sugar goes through the roof and you don't know why, and you begin to ask, what have I done? I've been a very good parish worker, I have been very observant, I have loved the Lord and served Him with all my might. What have I done to merit this cancer? What have I done to merit a sibling who is always depending and asking money from me, depending on me? What have I done to deserve this need to take care of aging parents na may Alzheimer na, isa may Parkinson's, and you have to take care of your children in their teens? So you realize you're caught and sandwiched between two grown-up children and growing-up children. And then you begin to say, what have I done to merit all this? God shouts at you in your pain. And then you come to your senses and you realize that reality has set in, that you are called to love and to transcend family ties. As a counselor, I often use what is now known in the counseling circles as internal family systems therapy. What is this? According to its original idea, in family systems, you have the parental subsystem and the sibling subsystem. And between the two, there is what they call triangulation. Yung isang anak ninyo ay mas malapit sa tatay, yung isa mas malapit sa nanay. That's a triangulation, simply put. Yung isa makaama, yung isa makaina. Yung dalawa may kampian. Pag nag-uusap sila, laging pinag-uusapan si daddy. O yung dalawa, laging pinag-uusapan si mommy. That's triangulation. Now, in internal family systems therapy, according to their theory, lahat tayo ay merong internal family systems. Meron tayong protector, meron tayong kuya o ate na nag-aalaga sa atin tuwin na we have internalized it. Pero meron tayong mga exiled portions of our personality, yung ayaw natin tanggapin sa sarili natin. Yung laging masama ang loob, laging may angal sa mundo, laging hindi lapat ang upo, laging may mali, ang hirap kasama sa bahay, wala kang ginawang tama. And so in therapy, what my aim is to help them realize that deep within themselves, there is a battle going on between their protector and the exiled parts of themselves. Yung ayaw nilang matanggap. Meron silang internal sibling na tampulan ng kanilang galit, ng kanilang tampo. Kung kaya noong nakita ng kuya na naghanda ang ama, nagpapatay ng pinatabang guya, nag-imbita, naghanda ng magagandang damit, nag-imbita ng mga musikero, ano ang sabi ng kanyang anak na panganay? Hindi man lang ako binigyan ng kahit isang batang tupa para ipagdiwang kasama ng aking mga kaibigan. Lumabas ang lahat ng tampo ng kuya. Resentment. Reality has come in. Today, I'd like you to know that kinship and blood ties may not guarantee your closeness to your sibling, to your parents, to your cousins. Pagdating ng hatian ng mana, nagdidemandahan ng magkakapatid. I've seen so many sad stories about sibling rivalry carried over through the decades. Lumabas nung namatay yung magulang. At lumabas ang lahat ng resentment. Hindi ako naghanda sa aking birthday, nagdibo ako nang walang nakapansin. Pero yung anak ninyong bunso, lahat ng paghahanda taon-taon, 1 taong gulang pa lamang ay grand fiesta na at napakamahal ng ginastos para sa birthday. Ako lagi ang tagasalo, ang tawag dyan tagasalo syndrome. Ako lagi ang kawawa, ako lagi ang naiwan. Then, what is the good news for us? All of us feel like this. Ang tawag namin dyan ay abandonment issues. We all have abandonment issues. Iniwan ako ng nanay, iniwan ako ng tatay. Inalagaan, hindi ako inalagaan. Pinag-aral lang ako sa Pio del Pilar, hindi sa Ateneo. Hindi ako pinag-aral sa magandang eskwela. Laging hand-me-down ang aking suot. Then, today, I'd like you to focus on the good news. Come back to your senses. Come back to the Lord. Come back to love. And therefore, if blood and kinship ties are no guarantee, there is a guarantee, a surefire guarantee for your well-being, and that is to transcend physical, emotional, blood, and kinship ties and go to the level of virtue, love, even if it costs, love, even if it hurts. And I will have to go against that famous Filipina actress who said, love can never lead to hurt. She doesn't know what she's saying. If you love, you're ready to hurt, to be hurt. Because love means self-giving. Love means forgetting about yourself so that the others can become what God has meant them to be. He must increase, I must decrease. That is the statement of love of John the Baptist, who preceded the Lord, who was a forerunner, but then he accepted the fact that he was only forerunner. He was not the Messiah and never claimed to be one. And nagparangya pa kay Jesus. He must increase, I must decrease. Come back to our senses. Don't hold on to blood and kinship ties. Hold on to virtue and hold on to God. And when you hold on to virtue and to God, you will realize you're just as sinful as your older brother, as bad as your younger sister, but as called to glory as everybody else. Come back to the senses. Come back to the fold. Come back to God.